Excellent. And yeah, and then at this point, I think Daniel is going to start us off. So if we could pin Daniel, then we can. Yeah.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. We're patiently waiting as we have a few more people who are going to be joining us. Our attendees are all entering the call as we speak. And I want to just note that this event will be recorded. And if you have a question for any of our guests, please do add it to the chat box using the star hand up. We'll use that as our kind of way of raising our hands. And so if you can just put that, and I've given you an example in the chat, you'll just write star hand up to get your hand raised and self-recognized. And then once we have had everyone join, I think we are already recording, and closed captioning is on, and we ask anyone that is using any visual assistance to please send a chat privately to myself, Daniel Stein, so that we can ask attendees to refrain from using the reactions and emoji functions, which can be distracting when using those visual description features. I will look out for any such messages in the chat. And Antar, if you want to go ahead and start us off with our introduction.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you. Good morning, afternoon, and evening to those joining us globally as we continue our quest for reparative justice. My name is Antar Keith, and I serve as the chair for the Reparations Task Force of Democrats Abroad. I invite you to share in the chat where you vote, where you are tuning in from, and what or who brought you here today. Today, we focus on the case for reparations from a series of faith-based perspectives. We will be hearing from leaders in the Jewish faith and Muslim faith, as well as the Christian faith, specifically, the Catholic and Methodist denominations. We come together to learn and deepen our understanding of the intersection of religious faith and reparative justice, how religious groups can play a role in striving for reparative justice, as well as what the history within these faiths can teach us about efforts to operationalize reparative justice in their organizations. The Global Reparations Task Force strives to unite with all whose goal is to build and finish the work of reparative justice for Black Americans as a critical and monumental step toward a just society we organize to win. In the words of Kirsten A. Mullen, this mission is indeed a sacred one. With that in mind, we are very grateful to our special guest speakers who advocate and agitate for that just society in collaboration with the reparative justice movement. We also thank our co-sponsors whose leaders join us today to support our efforts and describe what their constituencies are doing to realize the better world we all know is possible. Daniel, back to you.
Thanks, Antar. Today, our discussion centers on the role of religion and religious communities in bringing into fruition reparative justice. We have the pleasure of having as our speakers Dr. Rebecca Hankins, Jared Smith, Rabbi Lynn Gottlieb, and Reverend Michael Yoshii. Any questions that you have will be taken after all the guests have spoken. And we ask that, again, you use that star hand up in the chat box to be recognized in order to unmute and ask brief questions. You are also welcome to type questions in the chat if that is more accessible for you. And with that, we will go to Dr. Rebecca Hankins. Dr. Rebecca Hankins is the Wendler Endowed Professor and a certified archivist and librarian at Texas A&M University. She has been at Texas A&M University since 2003 and is a full professor in the Department of Global Languages and Cultures in the College of Arts and Sciences. US President Barack Hussein Obama appointed her to the National Historical Publications and Records Commission, NHPRC, of the National Archives and Records Commission from 2017 to 2020. She has published and presented internationally and nationally on Islamic science, fiction, fantasy, and teaches courses on Africana literature and popular culture, memory and myth-making, and the use of primary sources in research methodology. Dr. Hankins, please take it away.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Antar and everyone. Can you hear me all right? Am I loud enough? All right. So this is a subject that I have often presented on, especially when I'm talking to students about internationalism and collaborations and the importance of understanding the global community that we're all in. And I forgot to also note that I am living on violently settled land that belong to the Wichita, Kickapoo, and Tawakano tribes here in Texas, in College Station in particular. But so I did want to, so one of the things that I always tell students is that we live in a circular environment. Everything is connected in some way. And so what Islam, and I will say I'm not an Islamic scholar, but I have practiced for a long time. But what we do know in Islam is that justice and oppression are the two things that are very central to Islamic theology, Islamic connections to other faith-based traditions. And so you will see that so many Muslim communities are also a part of the discussion around reparations. And even to the point where even Malcolm X and the Nation of Islam, when he was a part of it, really called for reparations in 1963. So reparations is a really interesting discussion, and I really think it is, especially in this current time where you're having the monarchy being passed from one to Charles, King Charles, and the fact of so many countries were conquered and violently their wealth was taken from them. And so you see all of these things coming together. And I always think about the fact that when you hear people say, why should we give reparations to African Americans? The reality, as Ta-Nehisi Coates noted in his 2019 congressional hearing testimony, that a lot of the individuals who received benefit from the wealth that enslaved Africans generated are still alive to this day. And we have to recognize, and I always tell my students that reparations have been given. They were given to slaveholders at the same time that they were not even given to enslaved individuals. So there was always this recognition that if people were losing something, they needed to be compensated, but it was never compensated for African Americans. And you see that Also in the fact that in 1834, this government up to 2015 was providing reparations to former slave owners. In 1862, Lincoln signed the Compensated Emancipation Act, where it compensated slave owners for their enslaved Africans to $300 per person. So this is not new in terms of why people should be compensated for having to build and lead this country, and in many ways were responsible for the wealth that this country has benefited from. And so this has been all over the world, except you'll find like in these former colonized and states or countries like Haiti, which is still paying reparations to France. Why, I don't know. So it's important for us to recognize that, especially here in the US, 78%, according to the Pew Research Center, 78% of African Americans recognize that reparations should be provided, even though only 80% of whites. And you wonder why that is. I mean, the fact is reparations were given to Japanese Americans. Reparations were given to Jewish Americans, Jewish people. And so when it comes to African Americans, there's always these double standards. So I tend to deal with absolute documentation and primary source material. And we have that kind of information available if people are really interested in understanding the truth. And the last thing I wanted to say was Randall Robinson, who died this year, he made it his life's mission to talk about, and so to talk about the fact that African Americans have never been provided reparations. Our 40 mules, 40 acres and a mule never happened. We were never given that. And that was supposed to have been reparations. And it has an impact, as Ta-Nehisi Coates has shown, to Black wealth and the fact that Black individuals and families passing on that wealth. So I think that there's documentation out there. We can talk about how it can be done. The state of California has talked about some really innovative ways of doing this. But the reality is it has to be a financial. That's the one thing each of these individuals know. It has to be a financial type of restitution. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hankins. Thank you. That was very impactful information. Very, you know, as I already know, you know, it's the kind of research-based focus that I've come to expect from your wisdom and insights. So thank you. Thank you. Okay, so coming up next, before I introduce, I just want to have a brief preamble. In a recent chat with a powerful voice from our progressive wing in our state party, Democrats Abroad, Rabbi David Mivasir, I recently learned of powerful justifications for reparations found within the Bible, specifically in Exodus 12:35-36 and in Deuteronomy 15:12-14. Now, Rabbi Mivasir could not be here today to introduce our next guest, but he, without a shadow of a doubt, would have been ecstatic to introduce this personal shero of his, Rabbi Lynn Gottlieb. Rabbi Lynn is a pioneer feminist rabbi, storyteller, percussionist, peace educator, writer, ceremonialist, community activist, and clown. She is deeply committed to a life grounded in the creativity, joy, and wisdom of the Torah of nonviolence. Her journey includes lifelong activism with the Fellowship of Reconciliation, an ongoing pursuit of Israeli-Palestinian conflict transformation based on principles of active nonviolence. She is also one of the first female rabbis in Jewish history. Since 1964, Lynn has engaged in multi-faith, intergenerational, and multicultural organizing around issues of economic and racial justice, gender justice, and the demilitarization of land and life. Rabbi Lynn, how are you today?
Good morning and good afternoon and good evening. It's an honor to be here and a duty to be here. My name, I'm going to introduce myself in my ancestral way. My name is Miriam, the Bat Sivia, Bat Bessie, Bat Delia, Bat Jenny, Bat Henrietta, daughter of Henrietta, who settled here on settled on Turtle Island on unceded Lenape land, and founded the 10th oldest synagogue in the United States in 1839. I am an Ashkenazi elder woman with long gray hair, and I'm sitting on unceded land in California. The Talmud teaches us one who harms another is obligated for 5 things: damages, pain, emotional and physical trauma, the damage of pain, the damage of emotional and physical trauma, damages from lost or work, and emotional shaming, loss of dignity. This is a development 1,000 years in the making after the original statements that are in the Torah. And it's important to understand that this piece of teaching found in the Babylonian Talmud in the Mishnah is part of a long oral tradition that tries to clarify and relate the concept of reparations in an ongoing way. And this is an obligation. It is considered one is obligated to pay a debt. And in this thinking of this, it is clear beyond any doubt that the United States of America owes a debt to Black people for the ongoing harm originating in the transatlantic slave trade. There is no doubt. And so as a white woman, I am obligated, and my community, the communities, many Jewish communities that I serve in all kinds of ways, also owe a debt, the Ashkenazi sectors of our community. And so we look to our tradition to help guide us and to, as was said, efforts to operationalize the debt, operationalize the payment of what we would call tshuva. And this 5-step process has parallels in the UN Treaty on Reparations, and I'm glad to say that gives it a global perspective. I am part in operationalizing. I was asked to join and did the grassroots reparation campaign, and also Interfaith Movement for Human Integrity in California. And in both of those places, all of which have over 300 congregations, it's part of the movement building within what Christians call faith-based communities, allows me to work on supporting frontline people in efforts for reparations, as well as training my own community, those who are interested in learning how to operationalize reparations. As a Jewish person, this inevitably means wrestling and being accountable to the harmful consequences of the ongoing harms of Zionism, because I cannot speak as a Jewish person on the issue of reparations for the ongoing harms of the transatlantic slave trade without understanding how the U.S.-Israel military alliance provides surveillance and many aspects of the policing, which is part of the harms, the ongoing harms, and articulating those ongoing harms is part of the process of what we call reparations tshuva, acknowledging the ongoing harms by hearing from frontline people who are experiencing the burden of those harms in systems of mass incarceration, police violence, loss of voting rights, redlining, gerrymandering, detention at the border, separation of families, forced displacement, attacks on female, trans, and Black and brown bodies via attack on healthcare and reproductive rights, the removal of wealth from education systems, and on and on. So this is a huge issue which touches every sector of life. And as we look for guidance to approach dismantling of these systems from within our own tradition, we have 5 stages which we can speak to. First is acknowledging the harms that are done and embracing a process of repair. And this involves the teaching of empathy and compassion and seeing our human connectivity and embracing those kinds of narratives. I'm going to go through this quickly, and I'm happy to come back to it. Secondly, is acknowledgement of the web of accountability. Accountability and one's place in it, tracing one's own footsteps of harm, the local harms, that is what we call harata. This is critical, and it means that in this process of repair, one can come to it with a sense of joy in that this is a step to healing relationships. Thirdly, truth-telling. This is vidui, publicly naming the harms and embracing the narrative of directly impacted people, of Black Americans, in all of the diversity, the many, many voices in many places, and looking at that as a way to help support tactics and strategies for repair, which includes at the top of the list this aspect of reparations, which includes rehabilitation, compensation, and satisfaction. These are very important pieces of reparations. That's the actualization of reparations in measurable repair. And finally, the 5th step, all of these have Hebrew names. The 5th step is azivat achet, which means these are guarantees of non-repeat of the harm that include agreed upon systems of ongoing accountability, rehabilitation, and repair. This is a 1,000-year-old system that we can use in this moment to activate and operationalize. And for me, as a spiritual teacher, I try to educate, on the one hand, anyone who's interested, and teach these principles, which include the centering of voices of directly harmed people, which has always been Jewish tradition from biblical times to this moment. But we have to choose it. And at some other time, I'd be happy to share, I can put it in the chat, the reparations pledge that was created by the Grassroots Reparation Campaign. And your communities can use this, plus There you can find a cycle, a ceremonial cycle for the nation, which starts with Juneteenth and continues throughout the year, so that reparations can be part of the ceremonial and religious cycle of every faith-based community, so that it can root itself in that religious responsibility and ongoing repair. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Rabbi Lynn. That was truly phenomenal. Daniel, did you want to take the reins again?
Sure thing. So thank you very much, Rabbi Lynn. We are now going to hear from Reverend Michael Yoshii, who's an ordained clergy in the United Methodist Church. He retired in July 2020, most recently serving as the pastor of the Buena Vista United Methodist Church in Alameda, California, a historically Japanese American congregation. During his pastorate, the church was a hub for organizing on racial equality, affordable housing, renters' rights, LGBTQ+ inclusiveness, and immigrant rights. He has served the global church on the General Board of Global Ministries and was one of the conveners of the United Methodist Kairos Response, international network advocating for Palestine human rights through BDS, that's boycott, divestments, and sanctions. Reverend Yoshii currently serves on the International Campaign for Human Rights in the Philippines, ICHRP, Global Council, and is the co-chair of the Friends of Wadi Fokin, an interfaith partnership with a Palestinian Muslim village in the occupied West Bank, begun in 2009. Reverend Yoshii received his Master of Divinity in 1986 from the Pacific School of Religion, where he also currently serves as the coordinator of United Methodist Students. His testimony in 1981 at the Japanese American redress hearings before Congress was a catalyst for his study at the Pacific School of Religion. Reverend Yoshii, please take it away.
Thank you, Dana, for that introduction and for the invitation to be with you all here today. And also give appreciation to Rabbi Lynn. Good to see you, Lynn, in today, and for Dr. Hickens for your remarks. I hope I can add something substantial to the conversation today. I am zooming in from Ohlone Land in Alameda, California, and also my backdrop photo is taken from the cemetery where my maternal and paternal grandparents and my mother are buried. And I would like to invite their presence into this remote gathering today because they're always with me in my life and particularly in my path of faith as well. So I hope you can all receive them into this conversation as well. And I come to you today as a Japanese American United Methodist. I'd like to emphasize today the incarnation into this world for me as a Japanese American, because that's the context in which I approach this matter. But first, for the Methodist perspective, after Congressman John Conyers introduced H.R. 40 in 1993, calling for the establishment of a commission to study reparations for African Americans, United Methodists brought the issue to our General Conference in 1996 and passed a resolution to support H.R. 40. Our global convenings take place every 4 years, and so the resolution has continued to be affirmed and or amended periodically since 1996. And the latest version of the resolution was approved in 2016, titled Support Reparations for African Americans. It was resolution number 3066, and I've asked Catherine to share the link there for the full text of it, which I won't read today for lack of time. But I do want to highlight the scriptural citation that laid the theological foundation for the resolution from Isaiah 61, 1-3. Quote, he has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim release for the captives, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor, to provide for Zion's mourners, to give them a crown in place of ashes, oil of joy in place of mourning, and a mantle of praise in place of discouragement. This was the text that undergirded the the language of the text for that resolution. In more practical terms, the Methodist Church is a huge institution with 12.5 million members globally, and the resolution called upon our boards and agencies within the church to educate our members on this issue. And in particular, I think it'd be interesting for folks here to know that our General Board of Church Society, located in Washington, D.C., is the hub for the dissemination of information and organizing around the issue of reparations in the United Methodist Church. And I have colleagues, Black pastors, who are connected in with that particular effort. But I wanted to share spiritual reflections on the Japanese American campaign for redress and reparations as it intersects with H.R. 40. The introduction of H.R. 40 in '93 followed the passage of the Civil Liberties Act of 1988, which apologized to the 120,000 Japanese Americans subjected to mass incarceration following Executive Order 9066, issued by President Roosevelt on February 19, 1942. The legislation provided monetary redress of $20,000 each to each person incarcerated during the war. And preceding the legislation, the process began with the establishment of what was called the Commission on Wartime Relocation and Internment of Civilians, which convened 11 hearings in cities across the United States where populations of Japanese Americans were concentrated. Following the hearings, the commission issued a report in 1993 titled Personal Justice Denied, in which it concluded that race prejudice, war hysteria, and failure for political leadership led to the mass incarceration. And that report then also recommended the monetary redress to be issued to all surviving incarcerees. In the San Francisco area in 1981, I volunteered to do outreach to churches in preparation for the hearing scheduled for that summer. What is good for this forum to know is that in the Japanese American community, there's a diverse religious demographic. In addition to those of us from the Christian faith, nearly 75% of the incarcerees in 1942 were Buddhist. A smaller number, only 1%, were Shinto. So outreach was being conducted in all sectors, including churches and temples. And what I found in my outreach was that most people at that particular time were very hesitant to testify. But many were interested in attending the hearings to see what was going on. That included my own parents, whose family members were incarcerated in Topaz, Utah, and Jerome, Arkansas, respectively. When my parents declined to testify, I received their blessings to testify on behalf of the family. And when we attended the 3 full days of hearings, it was especially gripping because this was the first time, the very first time in my life that I've ever experienced Japanese Americans coming together for the sole purpose of discussing this historic event as a collective community. I had grown up without our community and even our families talking much about what had taken place the previous 40 years before. The story of the Valley of the Dry Bones in the book of Ezekiel, chapter 37, became a metaphor for me theologically to understand how new life and new spirit can be breathed into the dry bones of a collective community. In this case, for us, our Japanese American community. For me, the hearings were a spiritual catharsis as I felt this collective energy of new, a political but spiritual consciousness as well in our community. And it was only the beginning. This was not the end. I only learned recently that one of the commissioners, Father Robert Drinan, a Jesuit priest, wrote an op-ed piece referring to reparations as a form of atonement. And I think that's what I was experiencing in the process of the hearings. The same year the Civil Liberties Act of 1988 was passed, I was appointed to be a pastor at the Buena Vista United Methodist Church, an historical Japanese American congregation. When members began receiving their letters of apology and checks in the mail in 1990, I noticed diverse reactions. For many, the letters seemed to trigger emotional and psychological trauma that had been dormant for some 45 years. And as I speak about it right now, I get emotional just remembering the reactions on the faces and hearts of people. It was important for me at that time to provide pastoral support for trauma, which I perceived to be being revisited because people hadn't talked about this for so many years. While at the same time, it was also important to provide theological interpretation for the victory of reparations. It was also notable that in the larger community, the Civil Liberties Act had excluded painful memories and narratives of resistors who were imprisoned. Also, the early arrests of Buddhist and Shinto clergy that had not been talked about, and the entire narrative of Japanese Latin American incarceration as well. Pastoral theology necessitated the creation of spaces for healing. Prophetic theology led to an understanding that while legislation was enacted for our community, it belonged to all people who might be victims of race prejudice or hysteria and lack of political leadership. The pastoral and the prophetic were woven together into an integrated spiritual ethic of healing with justice. A prime example of this came in the wake of 9/11 when elder members of the church immediately raised their concerns about Arab, Muslim, and South Asian siblings who would become the face of the enemy as they had become during 1941 Pearl Harbor attack. Our subsequent outreach to these communities verified their gravest fears as we heard about FBI infiltration, surveillance, and deportations taking place in those communities. This ministry eventually led also to our outreach to Palestinians who we know carry a long history of suppression of their historical narrative and continue to live under the siege of military occupation. And what I have found is that from a spiritual perspective, our healing is bound up in the healing with others. There's a mutuality in our healing, and healing and justice move together in an interactive dance of spiritual efficacy. As I loop back now to the question of Black reparations, from a spiritual and theological perspective, our collective healing in America cannot be realized until reparations are granted to the Black community. There would have been no Civil Liberties Act of 1988 if there had been no civil rights movement to precede it. And this is why over 100 Japanese Americans provided written testimony to the Judiciary Committee in early 2021 to express our united community support for H.R. 40. I close my thoughts with the often quoted statement by Reverend Martin Luther King, Jr. We are all caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects us all indirectly. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Reverend Yoshii. I think we were all very much moved, as I can see from faces on the Zoom, by your words. So thank you very much. We'll move on now to a final speaker, and that is Jared Smith, who is the government relations advocate with the Network Lobby for Catholic Social Justice. His portfolio includes housing, broadband, tax, labor, and H.R. 40. Jared's reparations advocacy efforts had been expansive, including thousands of signatories on a nun's letter supporting the mobilization of travel to the Vatican to enlist support, initiating 28 days of prayer that was written asking President Biden to issue an executive order for H.R. 40 and many others. Reparations are a priority for Network Lobby. Network is a Catholic faith-based organization that was founded over 50 years ago at Trinity College in Washington, D.C. Its premise was that vowed sisters wanted to see federal policy rooted in the belief that God created all of us and we all deserve the same quality of life. With that, I'll turn the mic over to Jared Smith.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Antar, Caitlin, and members of Democrats Abroad. It's a pleasure to be with you. It's great to share space with my interfaith colleagues. I am not a theologian, so, and I am not a priest, so I cannot, come at Catholicism from that perspective. I am Catholic. Like Daniel said, Network Lobby was founded over 50 years ago by vowed sisters. We have made HR 40 reparations a priority for the organization. Recently, our former executive director received the Presidential Medal of Freedom from President Biden, who is a Catholic. We have maintained very close relationships with Catholic members of Congress. And we have tried to push this bill that's been around for a long time, initially dropped by Representative John Conyers from Michigan. But let me say that if you look, I put our, oh, great, somebody, Caitlin, thank you so much. I was going to refer to it. Our website link that talks about some of our efforts regarding reparations. For Network Lobby and the Catholic Church, reparations, restitution is extremely important in my view. Why? Because what we are seeing here in this country and many other nations around the world started with the Catholic Church. The doctrine of discovery that was passed by or dropped by Pope Nicholas gave a fairly new monarchy in Portugal the right to go and conquer lands outside of Europe. Portugal and later Spain, France, Great Britain, they saw value in trafficking human beings. The Catholic Church blessed that action, and they received some type of payment for those actions, and those nations became very, very wealthy because of chattel slavery. So Network, we are not part of the Vatican. The Vatican is a nation state. It is a very powerful, very influential entity with over 1 billion Catholics in the world. But we do work with the Vatican on certain issues. Recently, a year ago, there was a pronouncement that Hannah Nicole Jones, Dr. Ron Daniels, Cam Howard, and others sent to the Vatican, asking the Vatican to make reparations and repudiate what the Vatican did to make chattel slavery real in this world. Network Lobby, I set up that meeting with one of the bishops. If you look at, there's a recent book that was put out by Father Kellerman, All Oppression Shall Cease. That is the seminal book that lays out why the Catholic Church owes reparations and an apology because of its involvement in slavery. We recently hosted Father Kellerman for an Ash Wednesday prayer service, and he talked about his book. He hosted a couple separate webinars to discuss his research. But understand that the Catholic Church, and it's run by the Pope, has known that slavery was wrong from the beginning, but they just covered it up. And if you read Father Kellerman's book, who is a Jesuit, he has plenty of documentation that supports his premise. The other thing that you have to keep in mind is there has been some movement with the current Pope, Pope Francis, to try to move the church in a different direction. One example is when Pope Francis went to Canada and he met with the First Nation representatives regarding all of the problems with the boarding schools that were run by the church. That is not just a Canada problem. That's all over the world problem. But because of that meeting, the church did repudiate the doctrine of discovery. So we are pushing not just to have President Biden and during the 119th Congress to bring HR 40 to a vote, or President Biden signing an executive order. We are working to push the Pope Francis to actually move the church in the place that it should have always been, stepping up and supporting those people that have historically been the foundation of the church. The church is supposed to look after those who need the most, that are most vulnerable. And in this instance, the church did not. And the church, not just the institution releasing a formal document saying that it repudiates chattel slavery, but the institution itself needs to pay restitution because the church did profit from slavery as an institution. And then finally, I'll say that most of you have heard about Georgetown University, that they set up a fund to help the descendants of the enslaved that priests sold to help at that time a failing university. The Jesuit order has said that they are going to make good on their promise to make these people whole, but it has been slow going. All the good things the church does, whether it is, helping the homeless or feeding the hungry, helping those people that are escaping violence in South America, coming to the United States. When it comes to chattel slavery and reparations, restitution, which is part of the catechism, restitution, it has been a slow moving, trying to get the church to change. One of my colleagues who used to work for the U.S. bishop said that the Pope, the Vatican, is more like a Middle Ages court in the 21st century. You have a better chance of getting a correspondence to the President of the United States than you do to the Pope, because there's just so many people around him. But as an organization, Network Lobby, we are committed to making sure that advocacy when it comes to HR 40 of reparations, that it is a big priority for us, because it is, I would argue, the biggest political issue for this country. And President Biden did say on the campaign trail that he would support a study on reparations. So we are trying to make sure that that does happen. So thank you very much, and I'm ready to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Jared. In order to begin our question and answer segment, we're going to have a few questions that we have asked our co-sponsoring parties to ask. Our first question is going to come up from the Progressive Caucus of Democrats Abroad, that is pro-DA. Then we'll have another question from our Global Black Caucus, and then we'll ask a question from us here at the Reparations Task Force. After that, we will have a brief roundtable discussion with audience questions, and look forward to all of you adding your star hand up to let us know that you have a question. So if you are, as you listen to the questions and answers from our co-sponsoring groups, we ask you to also think about questions you might have to add them after our co-sponsoring group questions. Bruce Murray, if you want to go ahead and take away the first question, we turn the mic over to you now.
Thanks, Daniel, and thanks to all of our speakers. We thank you for reminding us of the long history of faith in action. It is in solidarity with the vulnerable and exploited in our society, including what we see as progressive political action by faith communities. That is a legacy in stark contrast to the emerging Christian nationalist political movement in the United States, which purports to be grounded in faith, but clearly contradicts so many of the core teachings of its namesake. We are eager to unite in achieving transformative justice for all. Given the specific needs of Black Americans, Indigenous people, and others, we ask, how can we unite most effectively in our many communities for our common interest? What are the next steps? What can we do to encourage our political leaders not only to talk the talk, but walk the walk, to meet the needs of all of us for our common interest?
You know, I would say from thank you for the question. From Network's perspective, you know, we work with many faith organizations, and we're located in DC. So whether it's United Methodist, whether it's the RAC, Rabbi Pesner, whether it's Islamic Relief, and many others, we all work together to try to push certain issues like HR 40 reparations forward. What I would say for those people on the call, we need your support. When we ask for you to sign on to a letter, we need you to sign on to a letter. When we ask for you to send some type of correspondence, whether that's a text or a phone call to members of Congress, we need you to do it, because yes, we can set up meetings, we can talk to people, but if these members of Congress and the White House are not hearing from actual voters, then they're not really, you know, as in tune to what they should be doing. And they don't, you know, put it on a priority list, because there are, you know, priorities around the world. And if we want HR 40 to be enacted, then we need to work together in an interfaith capacity and move this to some type of resolution.
I will definitely co-sign all of that. We definitely need to keep this in the public consciousness and imagination. I think the 2019 congressional hearings was a great opportunity to present this whole issue. And also there needs to be lobbying to many of these Congress people who are very much in support of this. And even though there is the Democrats are in the minority and the legislature, they can still have hearings on this. And I think that's the important thing, is keeping it in the conscious of the American public. And I do think just this year, what California was doing in terms of having discussions around this and coming to some solutions. Unfortunately, that may be one of the ways to keep this whole issue going, is going to the state by state. Unfortunately, that seems to be the only way. And I'm in Texas, so, all we can do is keep mentioning it. I just gave a presentation to the Cyclotron Institute here at Texas A&M, where I included information on reparations and what religions say about it. So I think there are ways to get that discussion going, even in smaller groups. And I've talked to a number of international groups on campus. So I definitely think even if we can't get the larger community to discuss it, we can have these conversations that can percolate throughout our communities.
I want to piggyback on what Dr. Hinkins has just said about the local or state initiatives. I think today, I'm calling in from California, and today the state California task force is actually meeting. I think they're meeting right now as we are having this convening. And I was speaking to one of my former members who's on that task force, and he was saying how perhaps it's a both and, that there are state initiatives and municipal initiatives that can be happening while people continue to push for the federal action to take place, so that there's multiple efforts going on in a both and proposition, not an either or.
I like to piggyback on that too, because clearly we're in a movement building moment. And I think from a multi-faith perspective, we probably need to keep convening together as we build our tactics outward, whether we're working on our own home institutions through cultural and academic institutions, and the congregational institutions, so that we can create that religious and widespread culture of repair, the culture of reparations. So people assume that is the dominant narrative, and have many people, especially on the front lines, and all of us together, as you said, signing letters, lobbying toward the passage, not just of another study. We've had so many freaking studies. We just now need to, I think, focus on accountability, in my own perspective, to make reparations a payout of a debt, because it's not charity. It's a debt that we owe as a nation.
All right, thank you so much. I guess all of you who responded there, and we'll keep the questions rolling with our Global Black Caucus. I think that is going to be represented by Jazz. If Jazz, you want to take the mic?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Daniel, very much. And thank you very, very much to these absolutely amazing, empowering, inspiring, invigorating panelists that we have here today. Such great representations of all kinds of faiths that we have. And this is just a wonderful, wonderful Saturday afternoon to spend here together with you on this call. So thank you very much again. And also thank you to everybody who's joined this call, because I could see on the cameras we have people from all walks of life, from all continents spread across the world. And I think this is one of these events that will stick into people's memories for a very, very long time. So I would like to actually focus on how do various religious faiths approach the intersection of reparative justice versus basic human rights, particularly addressing systemic inequalities. So what, in your personal opinion, can religious communities play in promoting social and economic justice, and how can these efforts be rooted in the ethical and theological principles of their respective faith traditions? Thank you very much.
Someone speak.
Well, I'll speak first on that. I mean, having had a community that's gone through this, I mean, there is that efficacy of having the experience of moving through a reparations movement for Japanese Americans. But as I was trying to indicate in my presentation, our efforts were interfaith in many respects, and there were different ways in which it was experienced by Buddhist communities, by Buddhist leaders, as well as Shinto as well. And even today, there's more coming out about what took place with the Buddhist leaders and what took place with Shinto leaders that wasn't being discussed during the time of the reparations movement for Japanese Americans. And so I guess where I'm coming from there is that each of our faith traditions exists in a different context, both social context and political context, global context as well. But I appreciate the push towards an ethic of reparations versus just human rights. And I appreciated what Rabbi Lynn was sharing with us around that formula for what reparations looks like in a 5-step process, because I think that was so valuable. And what I was also trying to underscore is that when we went through reparations, when the bill was passed, it wasn't over. I was in many meetings after that where we were talking about healing, because healing was still taking place after reparations bill was passed. And people would come out of workshops and say, am I healed now? And it was obvious, no, people were not healed now. And when we take a look at it from a spiritual perspective, that's where I speak about, we're not healed until everyone's healed. And that this is a continuum of spiritual work that we're doing all together. So if we think about reparations in terms of a collective process, it's an ongoing process of reparations for everyone who needs to have a debt repaid.
And I'll say real quickly that you're talking about 2 billion plus people. And I always start my presentations about Islam by, making sure people understand it is a monotheistic faith. It is not monolithic. And for me, it's very much in the tradition of the civil rights movement, which I grew up, the modern civil rights movement, where everybody can do different things. And for instance, there were individuals in the civil rights movement who couldn't march. So they gave funding, like Clary Collins Harvey, who was head of the Church Women United, first Black woman. She was a millionaire. She could pay for civil rights workers who came into Mississippi. She provided them housing. There were podiatrists who didn't see themselves out there marching, but they knew that people out there would need someone to help them with their feet. There were hair salons, places where you knew African Americans couldn't go to the majority, so they were doing different things. So I definitely think that and that's the way I see Islam. There's no one way to participate because we are all so very different. And it is important that we recognize even the small things especially in Islam. I mean, where a smile is charity, where, giving someone something is charity. So it is very important to understand that not everybody can do the same thing. And there is no one model for participating in in reparations?
Well, I can speak to the, thank you so much for, I mean, it's just so enriching to hear everyone's perspective and to be inspired by it. I can speak to Jewish tradition's idea that, because we're not really a theological people per se, we are a covenant people. This means that we have a treaty. Basically, the Torah is a treaty. It's a social contract to prevent harm. And it focuses especially on people who are, because of racism, misogyny, militarization, war, are likely to be targeted by what we in our own time call colonial settlerism. So it has a particular format. And the UN Declaration of Human Rights, actually, in my mind, and in a lot of Jewish people's mind, is the new religious declaration. It is a global spiritual declaration of a new social contract, which if we looked at all of our traditions from different ways, I'm sure we could find in every one of those articles our own texts and our own traditions that support that understanding. And so I see the UN Declaration of Human Rights as a transcendent, multi-faith, global statement of our vision of social contract that which is not charity. When it is broken, we go to solidarity, the prophetic mode, which is solidarity and the debt that we owe and that we are obligated. So we don't really have a word charitas. We have a word tzedakah. That means we owe, it's part of maintaining a just and equitable relations. And I think the cyclical perspective is also very important, as Reverend Yoshii said. Systems can come to an end. We have to believe that unjust systems can come to an end. But also the racism, white supremacy, misogyny that motivates them is the spiritual issue where we are creating new narratives that impact our relationships. So all of these things are part of what we might mean by human rights, and are key, as far as I can see, to everybody's religious or faith-based or ancestral spiritual cultural pathway. And this is what can bring us together and build our movement.
And I'll just say quickly that from the Catholic perspective, we believe life and dignity of the human person. It's not supposed to be about race and these other constructs that we have. Within the Catholic Catechism, which is like our principles, restitution is part of that. So if you have stolen from someone, if you have acquired something illegally, then you are supposed to pay back that person that you took those goods from, services, by a number of fold, right? It's not just returning the value, but you have to pay, you could say interest on it. That is what informs the Catholic religion. But the question is, even though that is who we are and who we're supposed to be, we still have this problem called in slavery, chattel slavery, the history of chattel slavery, and how do you make repair? The Catholic Church has been around for a long time. I mean, all of the things that we've done and looked the other way, it's all been documented. It's all in the libraries of the Vatican. But you have to, get this institution to change its ways.
All righty, thank you. And as a representative of the Global Reparations Task Force, I have one question of my own. So, it's going to be almost like rather a quick lightning round, and also you can also, give the rationale as to why. But my question is, considering the level of injustice that was perpetrated by our legal system against Emmett Till, both then and today, with the passing of the individual, I don't even remember this character's name, their name isn't worthy of memory. What's worthy is Emmett Till was murdered. So considering the level of injustice that was perpetrated by our legal system against him, and the approaching birthday of Viola Fletcher, one of the last survivors of the Tulsa Race Massacre, what is one thing members of your faith tradition can do, be it in a social, political, or religious context, to bolster the movement for reparative justice now, while there are still living survivors of historic state-sanctioned mass racial violence? In other words, what is one thing you would advise members of your tradition to do in order to turn acknowledgement for the need for reparations into action, aimed at grasping governmental, media, economic levers of power, and pushing Biden to enact a reparations commission before other survivors pass on?
I mean, it's our, I would say, in America, we have the bishops, right? Bishops like run the church, and they have the direct connection to our parishes. And for whatever reason, America's bishops want to engage in things that are, in my opinion, moving society forward, that are not focused on the stranger, the most vulnerable. In many ways, they're repeating tropes that I thought that we had put it into many years ago. Until we get the bishops to stop fighting with Pope Francis, who I would argue is a progressive that really wants to see the change that you're talking about, it is very difficult, because the church has moved into politics now through the bishops, and they're doing a lot of things that are not helping resolve these issues, especially in the criminal legal system. The problems that we are seeing, and they're not speaking up, and they could have just incredible impact.
I piggyback on what Jared's saying too. In the Methodist Church right now, we're in the middle of a huge institutional crisis around the LGBTQ issue. It's a global crisis because of the divisions globally around how people perceive the issue. In fact, I was mentioning our resolution continues to be approved and passed each 4 years, but we haven't had a general conference. We didn't have a general conference in 2020 because of the pandemic, but we also haven't had one. And there's a lot of challenges going on, because the big issue that's confronting us is, how is the institution going to deal with this issue of LGBTQ inclusiveness and affirmation? But needless to say, I'm hearing what you're saying, Antar, because as people are still alive, how does this get pushed forward while people are still alive? As I invoked my grandparents into this session with my photo backdrop from the cemetery where they were buried, my grandfathers had already passed away during the time of the Redress movement for Japanese Americans, so they did not receive anything. My grandmothers did, because they were still alive. And so I think what you're speaking to is the fact that every day that goes by, there are survivors who are no longer going to be with us. And it depends also on how reparations is looked at upon, in terms of how people are compensated, in terms of whether survivors or some way in which to recognize all those who have been aggrieved. But I think the point you're making is well taken. Every day that goes by, there are those that leave this earthly world.
I want to mention Margaret Burnham here, who heads at Northeastern University civil rights. She works on civil rights cold cases. And I was also listening to one of the survivors of the Children's March in Birmingham. It's just happened, who was an educator her whole life. And I saw a process which my son, who is a public defender, was part of in East Texas with a survivor who had been shot and family destroyed. And I saw a process by which several things happened. There were in one of the 400 churches that was burned, and the community, the city came together and helped rebuild it with the design, and local Black businesses rebuilt it. There was the street was rededicated. There was compensation paid. There was public admission. There was a whole group of young lawyers that came to support this process with local Black leadership. There was a new section of the library which was stated so that there was ongoing, dedicated to this, the memory of this family and these incidents, and programs in the library. So I know we think and we should think in the big picture, but in terms of the survivors one of the survivors of this incident, it was so meaningful. And it happened with a local reporter, and then connected with Margaret Burnham, and then the religious communities in that town were involved. And I think we should be on the lookout for people who are trying to rectify unmarked graves and horribly racist names for statues, squares and statues and all of this, because the children, as in the Children's March, there is an opportunity, if not on a national level, for a local level to do serious reparations work. And that is where I think religious communities can move that muscle, get that muscle going, to build the movement that has to happen for the national effort to succeed.
And I'll give a plug to an organization that my daughter runs. It's called the United Nations Anti-Racism Coalition. And she just put together this whole program where UN representatives from the UN Expert Mechanism to Advance Racial Justice and Equity, Equality and Law Enforcement just went, they went to 5 different cities and around the United States, and these were representatives from the UN from all over. And the work that she's doing in terms of this, which I'll put a link to it, is one of those mechanisms. It's the same mechanism that you have had people like Malcolm X and a number of the Eric Garner's family who were where he was murdered, and some of these other individuals who have gone to the United Nations as this, international body and talk about reparations. And they've talked, she's always been involved in human rights work, but now they're looking specifically at what is going on in prisons, what is going on with violence against African Americans. So I definitely see the UN as a body that can push the United States to really deal seriously with these issues. So I don't know how we can get our individual organizations to really push this, except to, keep bringing the subject up. But we do have this international body that we should really seriously consider, setting up some kind of discussion with them to to really push this whole thing globally. So I definitely see the UN as one of those places where we can do immediately.
That sounds great. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for those wonderful answers, very insightful as well. Okay, so I'm going to shift it to Daniel, as Daniel is going to moderate, just the kind of questions, right? Audience questions. Before we begin, though, I just want to be mindful of the time. So, we're going to have to really perhaps close the queue now. Before the first question is asked, I just want people to be mindful and respectful of the subject matter that we are discussing. If you feel for whatever reason that perhaps the language that you are articulating yourself in your question might be abrasive in any way, shape, or form, take the time now to modify it. Because once it's out there, it's going to be recorded. And I've seen this happen for other sensitive subjects when we take it to the audience. And I'm just letting people know now, sometimes things sound differently once they're set out there when compared to when they were just floating in our head. All right. So with that being said, I'll give it to Dan.
All right. Thank you, Antar. So we'll turn it over to our first question, which is that of Jonathan's. If you do, by the way, have a specific individual on the panel that you'd like to direct the question to, we welcome you to specify that person, again, in the interest of time. But Jonathan, go ahead with your question. And perhaps unmute first.
I can't even see the first question that I put out there, so I don't remember what it was. I'm kind of trying to absorb and reflect and share at the same time, and obviously listen. So I don't remember what that first question was. Let's see, real quick. Oh, okay. I know we're coming at this from an interfaith perspective, and as I mentioned in my question, there are a number of educational institutions that are trying to do the right thing. I graduated from Holy Cross College in Worcester, Massachusetts, and they also own slaves, and they are trying to do good work that contributes to healing and restorative justice. But there are also many corporations or industries that benefited from slavery, textile industry and others. And I wonder if the work that this body is trying to do might have in mind appealing to certain industries or corporations to enlist their assistance in our efforts, so that it's a broad-based approach to restorative justice and reparations.
Jonathan, I'll just say quickly that Network, we do work with secular partners. Your idea is something that I've proposed. It's just really tough. We don't have enough people on this, right? So it's difficult enough to try to lobby the administration, Congress, but also to stand up advocacy on the corporate level is hard. But it's not something that we're saying that we don't need to do. It's just we don't have enough people.
Well, thank you for giving me that perspective.
Right. Well, thank you. Thank you, Jared, for your response there. We will go to the next question, which I believe is going to come from Ishmael. Go ahead, Ishmael.
How do you do? Ishmael Sachi from Democrats Abroad, Germany. Yeah, so this issue is close to my heart too, and I appreciate, Dr. Hawkins and Rabbi Lynn and Reverend Yoshii so much for the interfaith perspective you bring to this, which I think is the proper angle. And I appreciate all the work that you're doing too, Jared Smith. I can really see put a lot of effort into, and this is really important and needs to be moved forward. Yeah, so when I speak to people about this issue, what I get is, pushback. Oh, well, it wasn't me, it wasn't my family, it doesn't have to do with my people. Usually from, union members perhaps Anglo-Saxon union members or our Latino community, and I feel like we've got a lot of work to do to get them on board with this, and it seems like that's where the studying and that's where the research has to be directed at. And thank you very much, everyone, for your time and everything. Oh yeah, also Jared too. Yeah, I would love to get involved. I'm an attorney. And that was a great point that Jonathan, I believe, brought up about suing these companies. Like I said, I'm in Germany. It was good that the Israelis did a great job going after these guys. I mean, as Rabbi Lynn, I said, Volkswagen stuff, they made a killing off of poor Rabbi Lynn and the Jewish peoples. And I think a lot of American companies did so as well with the African Americans. And perhaps, I know it's obviously the statute of limitations is run and stuff, but in equity, I believe you could probably make some of these claims. And I would love to spend time drafting, those pleadings. And I'm sure there's many other people that would be too. And we might as well hit the companies with it, because they might just start settling just to get rid of the bad publicity, and a lot of times and just shake people down that way. But anyway, I thank everyone for their time. And if I can be of any assistance, anybody needs help with the pleading or anything, please reach out. Democrats Abroad, Dusseldorf. God bless you, and thanks for your time. See you sign off.
Thank you, Ishmael. I think that sounds like some potentially very helpful solidarity. And we'll go on to Mohammed's question now. If you have a question, Mohammed.
Daniel, can I just say real quick regarding Ishmael's question? We have been working with Harvard Kennedy School on a reparations project. And Antar, you've been there at the table. One idea that Harvard is trying to socialize is that the United States government, the Congress already pays reparations, but it's usually disaster relief, right? It is not something that we don't have like a vote when there is a hurricane or tornado or some type of other disaster in this country and people need help today. We do not just go to that state, and the people that are impacted in that state do not just pay to make those people whole. The country, all of us, help those people, and that has been our tradition for a very long time. So yes, I know people come up with these ideas that it wasn't my family or whatever. When this country goes to war or does things that a lot of people disagree with, we still support it. We still allocate funds to it. It is not just unique to the claim for reparations regarding chattel slavery.
All right, thank you very much, Jared. Mohammed, do you want to ask your question?
I just want to say that Slotty Dula has an organization for white people to check out their family histories and stuff. So there is educational opportunities for people to relearn that point of view.
All right.
Yeah, let me first start with thanking every one of the speakers. This was a really very interesting and engaging conversation. My name is Mohammed Ahmed. I'm a member of the Global Youth Caucus on the steering committee, and I feel like this is an important question. I asked this especially to Dr. Hankins, and all the other speakers can join in if they want. One of the challenges facing advocates for reparations is how to engage and mobilize younger generations who may not have direct experience of the historical injustices that reparations seeks to address. What strategies or approaches do you believe are effective in getting young people involved in the struggles for reparations? And how can we ensure their voices and perspectives are heard and valued in this moment?
That's a great question, Mohammed. One of the things that, especially if you're on a university campus, and even I think in high school campuses, they may have an Amnesty International organization. It's a group that I work with quite a bit here at Texas A&M. And I think definitely looking at some of these other organizations and developing a youth group within those organizations where, I mean, even with the Muslim Students Association, I mean, every year they're having events, you know, have them bring in speakers that talk about reparation, have them even for Black History Month, they're always having Black History Month. The Muslim Students Associations have bring in someone who is talking about reparations. But absolutely, it's not just about, you know, doing one thing. You have to be engaged. That's the one thing I'm always telling the students here. You've got to be engaged. Yes, your education, your studies are extremely important, but integrate those studies into those things that you enjoy. If your teacher has you write a paper, if you're told to do some kind of project, do it on reparations, do it on, you know, issues that you want your fellow students to know. You want them to know about these issues. So there are ways of integrating what you do in every aspect of your life. Just talking about reparations, you know, within your small groups to larger groups. I hope that helps.
I think that is I hope, I guess, that is a very helpful answer for you, Mohammed. We have one final question, and that was from Dr. Yael Danelli, I believe. If you want to go ahead and take the mic.
Thank you. Thank you for a very inspiring, amazingly inspiring and multidimensional discussion. I've had the honor of participating in developing the international law instruments, some of which Rabbi Lynn mentioned. And I asked actually both Caitlin and Antar to place maybe two of the references on the chat. I never learned how to do that. That I think might be helpful. But because you are faith leaders, I have a question to ask from the faith leaders' point of view. How do you think of the backlash? What do you see as your role? Because you are so uniquely placed. How do you see as your role to have to fight the backlash, not only politically, okay, but humanly in your own communities, in other communities of faith? There are so many other questions I'd like to ask about. I'm sure we will meet again. But there is a backlash, and I think that's part of the enemy of the movement. So how do you work with that? How do you think of that? How do you plan for that? Thank you.
I'll just say thank you for the question. That, you know, this work is measured in years. It's not just 6 months, 1 year of a Congress. You know, we started years ago, and we will continue to push until we see an executive order or Congress passes HR 40. You know, you at least from Network's perspective, we don't agree with our partners, secular and faith partners, on every issue. But where we can work together, we hold hands and we move forward. And for whatever reason, you know, organizations have different ways that they go through what, as Catholics, call the discernment process of how we decide whether or not we're going to support something. And we can't, you know, the Jewish groups, our Muslim brothers and sisters, other Christian groups, they have different ways that they come to those conclusions. And, you know, that's their organization. You know, we sit, pray, we try to work together. But, you know, sometimes we cannot come together, but that does not mean that we don't work on other issues that there might have intersection, like criminal justice with reparations, but it may not specifically be called reparations.
I mean, my response to, you know, dealing with backlash and all that is that for me as a Christian pastor, follower of Jesus, it's part of our faith. I mean, in the Beatitudes, it said, "Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." And for me, all through my tenure as a pastor and doing activism work, as we encounter resistance and attacks against us, that only fuels us more, you know, to stay the course. If we continue to discern that what we are doing is God's work for us to be called to, and in some sense, it gives a confirmation that what we're doing is the right thing, because there are people that are opposing it. It's part of to me, it's part of the religious dialectic, you might say, around what it means to move forward in creating the world that God intends for all of us.
I'll just speak from privilege point of view that many white people, as was indicated before, don't think it's not their fault, or it's not ongoing. There's all sorts of denial. I sometimes internally I work with 5 stages of denial that go with the 5 stages of tshuva, and I can kind of hear where certain white people are. And one of those recognitions is that, you know, sometimes it becomes acute, where you can't, if you're privileged, it's just like in your face, so you can't avoid it. But that just means that we haven't been paying attention. And therefore, as a spiritual leader, part of my job I see is to help people of privilege. And it's complicated sometimes with Jewish people because they're also bearing white supremacy's anti-Semitism, but for the last 400 years, they've been defined as whites in the United States. So we are intersectional in our capacity. And of course, there are many Black Jewish people out there. So you can't speak to Judaism and assume that. But for those who are privileged, it's learn how to take risks and to sort of flex that muscle about taking risks and realize that even the decision to take a risk, which, you know, that's a life decision in many, many fields, is something that needs spiritual support. White fragility and all of that. Yes.
Well, thank you so much, everyone, for your both questions and comments. I do want to take the last extra few minutes. We've really gone over our time, but that's only due to the I believe, excitement and engagement that we've had. I'd like to take these last few minutes to offer the panelists a minute each to provide a closing statement. And then we'll move on to our final announcements from our co-sponsoring caucuses and closing statement from our Reparations Task Force Chair, Antar Keith. So perhaps I'll go in the order that I see folks on my screen. Dr. Hankins, if you want to offer your closing statement.
Oh, I guess my gratitude for all that I'm hearing here and what I'm learning from. I'm always learning from colleagues and individuals where I present. So I just want to thank everyone. I'm going to save the chat. So thank you all for inviting me. This has been wonderful.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Lynn.
I'm going to share a pledge that came out of the Grassroots Reparation Campaign. I pledge to approach reparations as a healing journey. I pledge to acknowledge and work to heal the legacies of moral and material harm that originated with the transatlantic slave trade and continues to manifest harm in Black communities. I pledge to learn more about America's history of racism and its foundation of chattel slavery. I pledge to learn more about how structures and institutions built on slave labor continue to disenfranchise people in the African diaspora, as well as devalue Black lives. I pledge to act in ways that limit institutional complicity and violence against Black people. This may mean divesting from investments that harm Black people. I pledge to be sensitive to the intersectionalities of the harms of racism. I pledge to participate in reparations in my local community and encourage my networks to do the same, guided by the analysis and leadership of Black-led organizations and individuals. I pledge to take this message to my family, friends, and communities with love rather than through guilt or shaming. I pledge to undo racism within my own faith-based community, according to the principles articulated in this pledge. I affirm this pledge in my name, Rabbi Lynn Gottlieb.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Lynn. I do very much love the idea of acting from a place of love over guilt and shame. Reverend Yoshii, your closing statement.
Sure. I guess for me, my closing thought would be invoking the hymn Amazing Grace, which was a popular Christian hymn, but also became a song popular in everyday culture as well. And the reminder that Amazing Grace was written by a man named John Newton, who was a slave trader, who came to grips with the spiritual bankruptcy of what he was doing. And as he had this moment, which changed his heart, he wrote the song Amazing Grace. It's always a reminder to me that change among people who may be opposing what we all are doing is possible through Amazing Grace, that hearts can be changed. And so what I would leave all of you with is the blessings of God's grace to be with you, not just the ordinary grace, but the amazing grace that can transform and change hearts, both individually and collectively.
Thank you so much, Robert. Jared, your final comment?
Thank you, Daniel. And I would like to thank everybody who organized this webinar and my panelists. It's always great to share space with the interfaith community. I would say that those people that participated in this webinar, you can't let this be the end of your work on reparations. Some think that the second civil rights movement that started in the 50s, it really came to a climax because of the influence internationally. The United States wanted to make sure that whether it was Russia or what was going on in Vietnam did not impact its standing around the world. Since you are literally calling home outside of this country, you need to continue to work with other Americans who are living abroad, and those people that are, residents of Germany, Great Britain, France, all the big Western countries, and tell them to put pressure on their countries to say that America needs to resolve this issue. It cannot just be something that's done within America. There has to be external pressure for America to do something with reparations, HR 40. That's the only way that we're going to see this. I mean, the country's reputation is always important. It is something that, this country, through the State Department, the administration, the White House, works every day, make sure people say good things about America. So we need to call out leaders and have them make this a priority.
Thank you to each of the four of you. We'll go ahead and turn it over to our representative from the Global Black Caucus, Jazz Moore, if you want to offer your closing statements and announcements.
Yeah, sure. Again, thank you very, very much from the bottom of my heart. The sun is going down in the background, and I couldn't be a better setting for that. So again, thank you all for those, not just wise words, but words that came from the heart. And I think we all feel very blessed by this. Yes, the Global Black Caucus is proudly inviting you to join us for an exciting opening lead event to the Democrats Abroad annual global meeting in Washington, D.C. on Wednesday, June 7th, 2023. Please join us for a tour through the National Museum of African American History and Culture, followed by a cocktail reception. The National Museum of African American History and Culture is the only national museum devoted exclusively to documenting African American life, history, and culture. During the tour, you will explore the museum's impressive collection, which includes over 36,000 objects, such as photographs, artifacts, and multimedia presentations that tell the story of African American life, history, and culture. After the tour, we will host a cocktail reception joined by a very special surprise guest of honor, where you can network with fellow Democrats Abroad members and Global Black Caucus members while enjoying drinks and hors d'oeuvre. So don't miss out on this unique opportunity to learn more about African American history and culture, meet new people, and kick off the Democrats Abroad annual global meeting with meaning and in style. Please do note, tickets are limited and we will allocate on a first come, first served basis. So we encourage you to register as early as you can, and I'll drop the link in the chat box there too. Thank you very much.
All right, and you can certainly see that link now, I believe. Jazz has dropped that into the chat for us. We'll go over to Sue Alksness, our representative from the Progressive Caucus of Democrats Abroad.
Thank you, Daniel. On behalf of the Progressive Caucus, I want to thank everyone who worked to make this such an inspiring event. When the Reparations Task Force was formed in Democrats Abroad, the Progressive Caucus reached out right away and offered to provide whatever support we could. And while the website was getting started up for the task force, items related to their work were posted on the Progressive Caucus website. So we're just so pleased to remain a strong advocate in support of that. And we look forward to working with you in achieving transformative justice for Black Americans and for all vulnerable and exploited people. The Progressive Caucus has an upcoming event. Our regular Pro-DA monthly Mondays meetings where we talk about issues and raise advocacy opportunities. And our next one is going to be on May 29th at 6 p.m. Central European time. And we'll be discussing the resolutions going to the Democrats Abroad global meeting coming up in June, and look forward to seeing folks there. The link will be appearing on our events page soon. And I think there's a link I can drop a link to our events page into the chat. Thank you.
Right. Well, our final closing statement will be from our RTF Reparations Task Force Chair, Antar Keith. Then please take it away, Antar. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. And I really want to say thank you so much to our esteemed guests. Everybody who's asked a question, all of our co-sponsors. This has been an amazing event. I'm still getting waves of thank yous from Americans all around the world who have really seen this as something that is very, very much phenomenal and important, and something very, very important that has happened in this organization today. So thank you again. I really want to tell everybody to please save the date for the next Reparations Task Force monthly organizing meeting. It will be held on May 31st at 1 p.m. Eastern time, or 19 o'clock Central European time. We will be discussing ongoing developments in the reparations movement. And if you want to attend that meeting, please join DRTF with the links provided by Caitlin in the chat box below. Larry asked about saving the chat. It is possible. Please click the three dots on the bottom right corner, and save chat will be at the topmost option, or you could just click on the three links that we've posted along with the other links and open them up in a separate tab. We will also like people to support our work in any way they can. So if you use the RTF donate link to donate, then funds will be set aside for the Global Reparations Task Force to continue helping our global party support pro-reparationist forces from around the world, coordinate our multiracial, multi-generational, and interfaith alliance for justice. Our mission has been to push Biden and the Democratic Party to fulfill their promise to enact a federal reparations commission. Your contributions to the Reparations Task Force donation link help us in securing reparative justice through legislation. Our fight is your fight. Support us today, and thank you very much again.